Grey matter. Once again, I can't tell you that. I don't know what happened. One moment we were having fun and drinking with our brothers, and the next we know people are turning into these goo monsters and trying to eat everyone. That's the statement of Tucker Wallace, Theta president of the local chapter. It started with a spiked bowl of punch and ended with a bunch of dead people, plus a burnt down building. A fraternity was celebrating the final hazing of their new brothers. Pledges that went through hell in order to determine that they were worthy. They had a good group of guys. They took every vile, hazed task with a stiff upper lip and didn't complain once. So the older members threw a frat party for their new members. It was supposed to be a night that the new ones were supposed to remember forever. An event that made all the silly crap they had to go through worth it. Tucker had ordered a bunch of alcohol from his usual store, something he's done a bunch of times before prior to parties. He suspected nothing would go wrong. Get the booze, get his guys drunk, and have a good time to welcome his new brothers. He was right. That night was a legendary night. The music was loud, the liquor flowed, and everyone was having the best time of their lives. There were some minor complaints about one of the kegs going bad with a weird tasting beer, but it was a minor thing he could bring up with the store the next day. The next few days were strange though. A few of his pledges and several of his fellow fraternity brothers started complaining of a bad headache, one that lasted long enough not to be written off as being caused by a hangover. So Tucker went to the liquor store where he got his beer, only for the owner to be missing. No forwarding address, and his number went straight to voicemail. There was no way to reach the man. Frustrated, Tucker had no choice but to give up on finding what was wrong with the beer he got. He watched over the week as the ones affected by the nasty headaches started acting really strange. They started getting really sensitive to daylight and their appetites sharply decreased. In addition to that, Tucker saw his frat brothers get more and more lethargic, not wanting to do anything but lay around and, oddly enough, drink more of the leftover beer. Tucker tried to stop them, but every time he tried to get rid of the beer, those sick became almost violently aggressive. It was the only time they did show any type of energy. So being young and not wise enough to stop them, he let them drink, thinking it was just a bad bug or something and it'll pass. It didn't pass. It got worse. The young man watched as their skin turned pale and their bodies rapidly bloat and swell. It was as if something was bubbling and growing under their skin. He could only observe, not knowing what to do as they got more and more obsessed. Both with drinking beer and eating whatever they could get their hands on, spoiled or not. Finally, he realized he had to tell someone and called the doctors. Tucker explained what was going on with his friends, and unfortunately, the doctors didn't believe him, thinking it was a bad prank. So he called the police and confessed to the cops what was going on, including the fact that he had a party with underage drinking and could they send someone over to check out his friends. The cops, taking him more seriously, sent someone over to look into things. They sent over a pair of patrol officers to take Tucker's statement, but when they arrived, all of the sick frat members were missing. The cops were about to arrest Tucker for making a false police report when they heard something loud crash underneath them. When asked what that was, Tucker denied knowing, but he knows that sound was from the basement. So the cops told him to stay put and they'll check out the basement, warning him that this better not be a prank. When the cops got to the basement, they found what made the large crashing sound. It was a keg that had been tossed at the wall. They also found what had tossed it, a bunch of figures covered in a white goo that was splitting apart and moaning in agony. The goo-covered things saw the officers and started rapidly approaching them. Giving warning to back off, the first officer didn't pull his gun fast enough and was grabbed by the figures. They made short work of him, bending and breaking his body into pieces, all while his partner had drawn his gun and fired on the mass while retreating. One of the stray shots hit the gas line and set off an explosion that killed the second officer instantly and set the piles of white goo on fire. Upstairs, Tucker heard the screaming, the gunshots, and started evacuating the frat house, only for the ground to shake and fire to race up the walls. He was able to get all the non-sick people out of the house before it collapsed inward in a pile of fire. Moaning was still being heard under the rubble. The final death toll was 13 infected students, 3 uninfected, and 2 police officers. The college was put under quarantine to make sure that there weren't any more infected students. 5 more students were discovered infected. Unfortunately, they had to be put down and their bodies destroyed. Tucker Wallace was arrested and charged as a school bomber. He was sent to a federal prison.